We are back, baby.
We are back.
Yeah.
Classic.
We are back.
We are back.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Coaster Jawn. In this video, we'll be breaking down the coasters of King's Dominion in Doswell, Virginia, just outside of Richmond, Virginia. King's Dominion is one of the premier thrill parks on the East Coast and is a part of the Cedar Fair chain. King's Dominion is a park with great landscaping and a beautiful atmosphere. While most of the rides have little to no theming, the midway areas look very nice and are well kept. King's Dominion has a very top-heavy lineup with some elite coasters at the top of the list, but is overall home to an impressive 13 roller coasters as of 2023. These are the coasters of King's Dominion ranked worst to first on Coaster Jawn. Last year, I was able to revisit King's Dominion, and with my Cedar Fair Platinum Pass, I plan on making multiple return trips this year as well. In 2022, King's Dominion finally updated their Safari Village section of the park by rebranding it to Jungle Expedition. Jungle Expedition brought with it the addition of the SNS 40 Freespin Tumbili and the retheme of the bobsled coaster Avalanche to Reptilian, both of which we'll cover later on. King's Dominion is a really cool park to visit, and I'm lucky to live only about 4 hours away from this underrated Cedar Fair park. Though I do think Katy is a special place, their coaster lineup certainly has a lot of filler coasters, which I'll try to knock out as quickly as possible. By the way, thanks for clicking into this video. If you're a returning subscriber, thanks for coming back. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing and liking this video to help others like you find this content. Without further delay, here are the coasters of King's Dominion. Starting with number 13, Great Pumpkin Coaster, built by E&F Myler and opened in 1997. The only coaster at King's Dominion which I haven't personally ridden, Great Pumpkin Coaster, in typical Cedar Fair fashion, does not allow guests over 54 inches to ride unless accompanied by a child. Given that I'm not a father yet, or a weirdo, I have not yet ridden Great Pumpkin Coaster, but I'm not really missing out on much. If I had to guess, this kiddie coaster looks like a 1 out of 10. Number 12, Apple Zapple, built by Mock Rides and opened in 2002.
Do you like apples?
Yeah.
Well, I got a number. How do you like them apples?
Another not-so-notable coaster, this Mock Wild Mouse is pretty basic. Like many Wild Mouse coasters, it's got those sharp, zigzagging turns that offer good laterals and does have a big drop, but the trains and restraints are not super comfortable. Themed to apples, Apple Zapple fits well into the Candy Apple Grove section of the park, but other than that, it's just there. This forgettable coaster earns a 3 out of 10. Number 11, Woodstock Express, built by PTC and opened in 1974. I've now ridden both this and its sister coaster at Kings Island, and it's just okay. Obviously built for the little ones, this small-scale family wooden coaster packs small thrills into even smaller trains. Anyone over 6 feet tall, like myself, are going to have a tough time fitting into the trains on this ride. Apart from big people problems, Woodstock Express does have a kick to it and has surprisingly good airtime for its size. Woodstock gets a score of 4 out of 10. Now on to the top 10. Number 10, Anaconda, built by Aerodynamics and opened in 1991. Man, I wish I could leave this ride outside the top 10, because I am not a fan of Anaconda. This aero looper is a harbinger of pain and misery in my opinion. Some people actually enjoy this ride, but I am not some people. Anaconda is visually appealing, with trees surrounding the queue and being built over a large body of water. Anaconda also features a tunnel and some very photogenic loops and corkscrews. I, for one, would much rather stay on the ground filming this coaster than actually riding it though. While Anaconda does pull some powerful positive G-forces and has some nice whip off the first drop, I found the large inversions and janky transitions torturous. As I said in my King's Dominion vlog,
Our Anaconda don't want none unless it is smooth and doesn't have headbanging.
and I still feel the same today. I really do hope the park decides to replace this with something like an RMC Raptor, because it is a really nice location in the park, just not a great ride. Anaconda earns another 4 out of 10. Number 9, Grizzly, designed by Taft, built by PTC, and opened in 1982.
Yeah, right. Grizzly Adams had a beard.
Grizzly Adams did have a beard.
Grizzly was what I assumed to be King's Dominion's attempt at recreating the Beast at Kings Island. While almost no park is likely to replicate the success of the longest wooden coaster in the world, King's Dominion swung and missed with Grizzly big time. Upon my first ride in 2021, I despised this rough monstrosity. After my second ride in 2022, however, I could see some of the potential of Grizzly's layout, but still got a bad ride. Fear not, King's Dominion fans. The new year of 2023 brought with it amazing news regarding Grizzly. The highly regarded wooden coaster manufacturer, the Gravity Group, has been tasked with retracking and renovating Grizzly. According to the park, Gravity Group plans to install their pre-cut wooden track onto Grizzly and should make it a significantly smoother riding experience. Gravity Group just recently took on a similar project renovating Racer at Kings Island, so hopefully the project turns Grizzly back into the coaster it was always meant to be. I'm sure Grizzly will rank higher for me after its revival, but for now, I give it a 5 out of 10 and it still sits at number 9. Number 8. Reptilian. Built by Mock Rides and opened in 1988. As previously mentioned, this mock bobsled coaster used to be known as Avalanche and had a generic Swiss Alps Olympic bobsled theme. As of 2022, Avalanche is now known as Reptilian, taking on a brand new theme and color scheme. Reptilian now sports orange tubular tracks and light green supports. Some might say it's too reminiscent of Nickelodeon colors, but I think it fits right into Jungle Expedition and complements Tambili very nicely. Reptilian also features trains which look like ancient paintings of reptiles, which I found to be very cool. Reptilian's ride experience is fun as well, given that the trains seat riders very low to the ground, making the bobsled coaster almost feel like a slide. Riders are whipped from side to side during Reptilian's turns and helices. Though Reptilian does have some slow, drawn-out spots, overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this ride and give Reptilian a solid 6 out of 10. Number 7. Backlot Stunt Coaster, built by Premier Rides and opened in 2006. Briefly known as the Italian Job, this family launch coaster always puts a smile on my face. Though I prefer the backlot at Kings Island, I know I've mentioned Kings Island a lot in this video, but how can you not? These parks have a ton of similarities, and I highly suggest both. Anyway, Backlot Stunt Coaster gives riders some really nice forces, from its 40-mile-per-hour LIM launch to its upwards helix and its small pops of airtime throughout. Backlot also features some nice theming and an awesome tunnel in the second half of the ride. This ride's fun for the whole family, and I do not mind at all that it's been cloned at multiple parks. Backlot Stunt Coaster also gets a score of 6 out of 10 in my book. Number 6. Tambili. Built by SNS Sensei and opened in 2022. Themed to monkeys, King's Dominion's newest coaster just misses out on the top 5 and is relatively underrated in my opinion. Given that it's yet another 40 free spin, naturally people hate on it, but I think this well-themed, smooth, multi-dimensional ride fits very well into King's Dominion's lineup. Tambili is a really nice addition to the previously mentioned Jungle Expedition, and it complements Reptilian very nicely. Now, for as much as I do enjoy Tambili, that section of the park is still in desperate need of a defining attraction to replace Volcano. That aside, Tambili provides some nice flips and forces with little to no discomfort, while not being totally barren of theming like all the other Six Flags free spins. Tambili earns a score of 6.5 out of 10. Number 5. Flight of Fear. Built by Premier and opened in 1996. Yet another sister coaster also found at Kings Island, Flight of Fear is a pretty solid ride. While riding a multi-inverting coaster indoors doesn't agree with my stomach very much, I still respect and enjoy this ride for its intensity and overall excitement level. I don't really have a preference between this ride and its counterpart at Kings Island, but I do think that this was a good coaster for Cedar Fair to clone. Flight of Fear provides an amazing launch, throwing riders into bone-crushing positive Gs. Though I do prefer the outdoor Premier Spaghetti Bowl coasters, I gotta say, Flight of Fear's many inversions and tightly profiled elements are still a lot of fun. Throw in some decent theming in the queue and you have yourself a pretty dang good coaster for the number 5 spot. Flight of Fear gets another 6.5 out of 10. Number 4. Racer 75. Built by PTC and opened in 1975. Originally known as Rebel Yell. Racer 75 is another solid coaster at King's Dominion. One of the park originals, Racer 75 has plenty of airtime-filled bunny hills and some nice turnarounds, which give a decent amount of lateral force. Racer 75 just had some retracking done recently, though it feels a bit half-hearted because they only retracked portions of the ride, instead of the whole thing. And they didn't repaint the new wood sections, which looks pretty odd. Racer 75 also has a common tendency to only run one side of the coaster on a given day. Because of this, both times I've visited the park, I've only ridden the north side and have not yet experienced the south side. Minor issues aside, Racer does have some great classic wooden coaster feel without skimping out on the airtime throughout the layout. Hopefully this year I can finally find a day when the south side of Racer 75 is running. Better yet, both sides so it actually duels. And hopefully the park decides to retract the older portions of the coaster so that it can keep chugging along for years to come. This classic Woody earns a respectable 7 out of 10. Number 3. Dominator, built by B&M and opened in 2000. Dominator is a top-tier B&M floorless coaster. It's also one of the numerous legacy coasters from Geauga Lake, also known as Dominator at the defunct park, as well as Batman Night Flight when it was a Six Flags park. Dominator operated in Ohio for 7 years, until being relocated to its current home in Virginia. It's amazing how well Dominator has held up after being relocated, because it's still so smooth and forceful. Dominator is my third highest ranked B&M floorless behind Superman Krypton Coaster at Six Flags Fiesta Texas and Kraken at SeaWorld Orlando. Dominator has an awesome first drop, collecting an impressive 65 miles per hour and shooting riders into a massive 135-foot tall loop, which provides good hang time as well. From there on out, Dominator is almost non-stop quick transitions and exhilarating inversions. While some of its turnarounds can be a bit dead at times, as well as the crawl into the final brake run, I think it's an overall incredibly well-rounded ride. Dominator also serves as a very nice welcome to the park, located close to the front entrance. So be careful going there early because it can attract big crowds at the beginning of the day. Dominator's loops, corkscrews, and forces give it an 8.5 out of 10 for me. We've now made it to the top two. These next two coasters are what makes King's Dominion a destination park. While everything up until now has been either average, slightly above average, or just straight filler, these next two rides are absolute top-tier elite roller coasters and are both solidly in my top 10 overall. Without further delay, number 2 is Twisted Timbers, built by Rocky Mountain Construction and opened in 2018. It physically pains me to put this coaster at number 2, because Twisted Timbers is not only one of the best RMCs out there, but it's one of the most badass, out-of-this-world coasters out there. It just falls short of the number 1 spot because King's Dominion happens to also have another coaster that fits that description. Originally a wooden coaster named Hurler, King's Dominion decided to close Hurler in 2015 and contract Rocky Mountain Construction to completely overhaul the ride into Twisted Timbers. Finally opening in 2018, Twisted Timbers is a spectacular addition to not only this park, but also RMC's repertoire. Standing at only 111 feet tall, Twisted Timbers reaches speeds of 54 miles per hour, while hurling riders through numerous sharp airtime hills and 3 total inversions, one of which is the demented barrel roll down drop, which serves as the first drop off the lift hill. That inversion tosses riders around like test dummies, and is an awesome way to kick off a ride that just keeps getting better and better. Later on, Timbers throws in 3 consecutive camelbacks, which have El Toro airtime levels, and honestly remind me a lot of the same elements on El Toro. Next is a cutback, which is basically another seat-ejecting inversion, followed by a few smaller bunny hills, and demented sideways airtime hills. Specifically what I find to be the most startling amount of airtime on the sideways airtime hill under the lift. After that is more and more airtime, along with very low to the ground 0G roll. The third lap of the ride finishes off with a few more sideways twists, turns, and a bunch more airtime hills for good measure. So yes, like every good RMC, Timbers is loaded with airtime, and that airtime is some of the highest quality out there. Twisted Timbers is absolutely elite in my book, which is why it earns a 10 out of 10. But another 10 out of 10 coaster just barely edges it out for the number 1 spot on this list. That coaster is number 1, Intimidator 305, built by Intamin and opened in 2010. One of the craziest coasters on the planet, this Intamin Giga coaster is just pure insanity. I-305 is solidly in my top 3 coasters overall, and honestly, after I first rode it, I contemplated putting it number 1. Intimidator 305 is not intended for the weary of heart, or for those with weak stomachs. Known for being one of the most intense coasters on the planet, early on in its history, Intimidator 305 had to be reprofiled on the first turnaround due to too many riders passing out from high positive G-forces. While I-305 has less riders passing out these days, plenty of people, including myself, tend to black out depending on certain conditions. As you might have seen from my King's Dominion vlog, I quite literally blacked out for a solid 5 to 10 seconds, which was just an unbelievable experience. Themed to the race car driver Dale Earnhardt, whose nickname was the Intimidator, Intimidator 305 begins with a command from Mr. Earnhardt himself for riders.
All clear means it. Out of here. Sit up straight and hold on tight and enjoy your ride, ladies and
Immediately after that announcement, Intimidator 305 aptly rises 305 feet above the Virginia landscape using a speedy cable lift and plunges brave riders down a 300-foot drop, reaching speeds of 90 miles per hour. After the first drop, it then goes into a long, low-to-the-ground turn to the right, which is one of the most intense, blackout-inducing elements of the ride. I-305 then rises into a large airtime hill under the lift. This element gives a decent amount of airtime, but is limited by the over-the-shoulder restraints. While some might not love these shoulder straps, I for one think the ride would be dangerous without them. And I think the straps are pretty soft, so they're not too bad. Next, your race car turns to the left and up into a quick airtime hill. This is the first of many intense pops of ejector airtime. After that quick pop, the train dives down and continues turning to the left. So I-305 just continually goes from trying to launch riders off the train to pressing them right back down into their seats with intense moments of positive G's. The train continues its intense turn to the left until the track deviously cuts to the exact opposite direction. This quick flip to the right gives insane sideways airtime and reminds me a lot of similar twisted elements on Skyrush at Hershey Park. I-305 continues turning to the right, then slightly turns to the left. This slight turn is short-lived because in typical Intimidator fashion, it relentlessly kicks gear the opposite direction once again. This element tosses riders uncontrollably every which way. Next is a medium-sized airtime hill, which unfortunately has a trim brake on it. This still gives a bit of airtime, but not as much as it could without the brakes. I-305 then valleys from the hill and rises back up into another small hill that twists to the right, giving excellent airtime yet again. The ride finishes off with another violent twist to the left, which is just ungodly, and finally turns back around to the left and twists once more up into the brake run. Though this ride only primarily has twists, turns, and the occasional hill, doing all of this at 90 miles per hour and changing directions so quickly makes this ride one of the most insane, forceful, and fun coasters out there. What's great about this ride is that it's actually too intense for most people, leading it to having some pretty manageable wait times throughout the day. So when you visit King's Dominion, be sure to get a few laps in a row, and maybe if it's hot enough, you'll black out like I did. I love Intimidator 305 and have little to no complaints about it. I-305 also earns a score of 10 out of 10 for being a perfect coaster in my book. If the scale went beyond a score of 10, this and Twisted Timbers could certainly break it. And that's all the 13 coasters of King's Dominion ranked. Like I said before, King's Dominion is very top-heavy, with 2 elite tier coasters and everything else is just kind of there. If you're looking for rides on a couple of incredible coasters, as well as to fill up your coaster count, this is definitely the park for you. So what did you think of my list? Is there anything you would change around? Please let me know in the comments how you rank the coasters of King's Dominion. I'd love to see how they compare to mine. Please drop a like to help others discover this video, and consider subscribing to Coaster Jawn if you haven't already. I've also got content on Instagram and TikTok if you'd like to follow on those platforms as well. Until next time, this has been Coaster Jawn. Ride on.